which depicts regular rhythm going to VTAC, going to flatline. Okay, so that's where this comes from. Looking at the EKG printed here, I turn the page, then turn back again. That flailing line is so small, almost nothing, a narrow mark across time, left behind, as a few molecules move inside a cell and out, frantic traffic coming to a stop on a microscopic street. If ever I want a small calligraphy of death, there it is. And over, I watch this man die. There must be a way to climb hand over hand back along this line as it adds to itself its attendant heart and all the other parts and sits back up to do whatever he does. Give the girl a diamond ring, all fake, but he means well. Belch and scratch, quote the Song of Solomon, confess to murder in the desert, embark on a dissertation, the best way to cook a pig, cry for mother, speak warmly and ironically of death, tighten the knot on his tie and take up the briefcase, humming a fugue in 4 parts, ask for a harmonica, and a hit me please, please, can't you see that I'm in pain? Oh man. And we can consider just how large a universe this flat line trails to extinction. And this next one is called Self-Help. And it's from the point of view of what I, in my mind, used to call a master of the universe. You know, a successful person of a certain age, always male, who has been brought low by illness and is coming to grips with it, and is listening to all the self-help mantras that people bring to him. Visualize success. Make a 5-year plan, a 10. Dream big. You can do anything you want to if you want to bad enough. Captain of your own ship, master of your fate. What I want is just to sit in that chair a foot away and get there myself. What I want is no nurse leveraging my not quite dead weight, rocking back and forth, chanting the jovial countdown. 1, 2, 3, there. How bad is bad enough that you have to want? Don't accept no for an answer. Make expectations clear. So, what is the expectation here? The partners visit, awkward in pastel shirts. Jack, you look great. Out of here in no time. Just concentrate on getting well. I know a lie when I see one. I'm seeing more all the time. He's not himself, my daughters say. But which self? This one was apparently neatly tucked inside the other, waiting only the tap of misfortune to step out of its cracked shell, smaller, shaky, unable to think of anything except breakfast. And the room is a bit chilly. Its cashmere scarf. Which self? Look at me, dithering, turned into a philosopher, a pointless profession which I rightly despise. Never give up. Fight the good fight. Failure is not an option. I was raised on these stories of resurrection. Broke, but made another million. A man for whom bellhops hop too. The comeback kid. Tough, willful, never down for the count, spitting out deadlines, always a contract to be hammered out. Tailored shirt gleaming behind ice cubes and scotch. So who is this guy in the hospital gown? No, 2, one put on frontwards, one back, shuffling around the nurse's station. Blue paper slippers sandpapering the linoleum. Who? I feel like the octopus I saw a long time ago in Mykonos, a Swedish tourist banging it against a rock, bruised, unmoored, in the grip of an angry god. I used to be the god, hollowed out, undone. All I can do is murmur vaguenesses reminiscent of the sea. Christ, what have they done with me?
I tend to get inspiration from my patients, and I meet people from all backgrounds of life. It's fun to hear their voice sometimes. And I wrote this one called Marion Rash. She said the rash began before the breathing began to leave, leaving her not quite floundering, but not swimming, and certainly not skimming the surface and jumping the wake the way she used to, skiing with friends at the lake, mist reflecting off her elm-brown cheeks and shoulders. And besides, she wasn't a spring chicken anymore, was she? The rash doesn't amount to much. It only showed on her fingers and was just from washing too many dishes and working the rosary about her son Paul, who cracked his spine while building the electric plant. He knew pain better than most, despite his acquaintance more than nodding with morphine, and he'd probably taken more than he should, as was his way when the battle dreams and blackness closed in. He shouldn't have gone driving, certainly not after those beers, but there's no point going on with blame now, is there? As he's with God and not separated from his perfection, like we sinners who have to rely on telegrams of mercy and redemption sent in directly. After a pause, she said, "Now that you mention it, can you recommend a salve?" Sometimes when I'm confronted with these incredible social inequities and difficulties, and people are asking for something so little, I think, well, at least I can do that. I can't do all of this, but I can do that. Well, I was inspired by Brenda, as always, who her talking about the EKG reminded me. I think we've criticized each other's poetry back and forth over the years, so I think there's some convergence. But I wrote one called "Standing Waves." I think it has to do with you notice in Brenda's work, there's not much separation between the art and the science. They tend to be fused together, and I think that that union is a good thing. This one called "Standing Waves." Should be avoided when marching in groups. The stack forces grow with the fall of each step, until a bridge twists off its mooring and falls to the chasm below. My friend was a static wave, until scotch and smoke increased the amplitude past the strength of his heart. The rhythm looked like double jump ropes whipping the same spot of hot pavement. But death is an inexact eraser. Even years after consigning his body to flame, there can still be expectation when the door opens. The particle is gone, but the wave remains. It's, sure, just, your particle duality physics, and that fits right in, doesn't it? So there's not really a difference between the science and the art. All right, let me turn over to Julie.
So this, I still write a lot about my patients, even though I haven't worked in the hospital for years. They just stick with you. And some days were just emblazoned in your brain. Those 12 hours are just going to be there forever. And that's what this poem is about. From what it kind of accounts one of my days when I worked in the surgical intensive care unit. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Abide. Though much is taken, much abides. Alfred, Lord Tennyson. Words were brimming from the patient's dark eyes. His mouth was sewn into silence. Barbed wire of sutures crisscrossed the stubbled landscape of what remained. His mouth now barricaded, his jawline gone, crater after the bomb. Beside him in the next bed, another kind of war was being waged. Rage swarmed the mind of this patient, the demons of DTs now in command, biting, spitting, hitting, any enemy, and the enemy was me. Only a thin beige drape divided the men, a border crossing between two nations. I traveled from silence to chaos and back again, unable to apprehend the native tongue of either one. At last, speaking my own, "You must not hit the nurse." Suddenly, from the man consigned to silence, a clanging peal of bed rails. I assumed the reality of cancer, of fresh wound, of muteness, of endlessness, of anguish, was finally crushing down, about to drown the man. Instead, I was met by the sound of his fist, marled and brown, punching his palm, air cracking with each smack until he calmed enough to jab an accusing finger toward the other man. He grasped my hand in his own, liver speckled and still strong, defending me the only way he could. And at last I was fluent in his language of sorrow, of dignity, of flesh made word. And so we've been pretty heavy here. I'd like to lighten things up a bit. This is a poem I wrote just because it was fun to write. And it's called The Patron Saint of Lost Things, and St. Anthony is the traditional Catholic saint of lost things. It's supposed to help you find stuff. And there is a phrase in here, Sing Sing, which is a notorious prison in New York. So you hear that. That's what that means. Finding some lost thing is a paradise all its own. When that leather wallet, worn smooth as a burro's back, ambles shyly into its old pocket, or when those Manilow tickets pry their way from beneath the fridge like convicts tunneling out of Sing Sing, or when those car keys rear their serrated heads like zombies emerging from their tomb of last year's tax returns, or when that plain wedding band rolls in shining and leaps back onto its rightful ring finger, the kingdom of heaven itself seems almost at hand. Thank you.
Yes, and we all have specific memories of specific patients. I carry around these manila folders from the day before there was an internet. You tore articles out and dropped them in folders so you could reference things. And when I retired, I dumped all the articles but kept all the folders. And sometimes I'm surprised. The very first time I read, which I think was here at Poets Corner a decade ago maybe, I got in front of everyone and happened to look, and my folder was labeled conscious sedation. And I was like, okay. My folder tonight happens to be, and I pulled this out of a random thing, Harry Hill, who was an amazing man who lived for many years with respiratory failure due to polio in a small town in Tennessee. And what a tribute to his parents, to the town, to him, the way he lived his life. This first poem is also about a specific patient. It's called Still Life, room 8005. So that's Vanderbilt up on the 8th floor. And this is about a younger patient. We had some, this is about a patient with a young adult with cystic fibrosis who was in and out of the hospital a lot. Still Life, room 8005. The room is always still in northern light. Plastic bags, one small, one large, dangle from the crosspiece of the IV pole. Backlit, brilliant, shining. A banana, the water pitcher, the edges of the breakfast tray, a medicine cup, 2 white pills like pearls, a jumble of handbags and jackets on the windowsill. Some mornings, it's her mother, motionless, a silhouette, arms crossed, looking out towards town. Sometimes the husband, innocent, bewildered. They have heard everything we have to say many times. But today, this young woman sitting cross-legged in bed, shoulder bones thin, bent forward, sad, exhausted, just waiting, turned to look at me. And the light caught her oxygen cannula just where it bends under her right ear, glowing. The illusion of an earring. For that moment, she was beautiful. And I wished I were Vermeer to show them. This second poem, again, is a little lighter. This is called Valentine's Day Abstract. And it does talk about p-values, which have to be less than 0.05 in order to be significant. Quality adjusted life years. This is a way we measure the benefits or the of a treatment in research. So, Valentine's Day Abstract. Stop this multi-center trial, controlled and randomized. It's time. I've been double-blind long enough. We've crunched the numbers, endpoint cardiac events, stuttering hearts hoping to disprove the null hypothesis, which claims no difference. Edit, hope is not part of peer review and must go, delete. But still, unblinded, the data tend to show a positive risk-benefit ratio. Survival advantage approaching statistical significance. We now know you suit me to a p-value of less than 0.05. Baby, you're the remedy. A significant savings per quality adjusted life year. The cure for this cracked and unlovely heart, or at least the current standard of care. All I need is your informed consent and you applied in all directions forever, randomly and uncontrolled.
Well, that was great. Well, if you'll forgive me, I'm not known for being particularly linear. I've been teaching narrative medicine to the interns for a while, and I just have to tell you briefly about a patient who was admitted, an older former policeman who was admitted with just some chest pain and heart failure. We see this all the time. The house staff said, let's just get him plugged in, get the fluid off. And I went to talk to him, and he told me that he and his wife had raised another member of the family because there was no one else in the family that was really able to do so. They had a lot of social deprivation, and they'd raised this child up until she was 18 as their own. And she had left to find her birth mother in Florida, had become pregnant, and then a year later, there'd been a car wreck 2 weeks before his admission that had killed his daughter and her birth mother, leaving the child. And he was contemplating at his advanced age with poor health whether he could take this on again. He had some heart failure, but what he had was heartbreak. And that was so essential to what was going on. He'd been a fireman and a policeman whose goal was to protect and to serve. And to be unable to do that was almost impossible. That seemed fundamental to our care. But anyway, I'm privileged to be able to be with people. Our patients have difficulty, and so I wrote one called Ague Dawn. The body remembers with conviction, but not clarity, in the small hours, when memories batter the defenseless who long for sleep before a sunrise recitation of the alphabet of aches. Any of you been through the night like that? I've had a couple of those. It's all right. Actually, it's really fun. I round with all these young folks, and I talk to the patients, and I say, how'd you sleep? And he said, well, you know. And I said, yeah, after about 40, you don't sleep through the night. And they all go, yeah, you said it, doc. And all the young people go, what are you talking about? You go to bed, you sleep for about 14 hours, you wake up. It's not that big a deal. I wish. I've kind of enjoyed the short form on some of these, and so I wrote another short one. I kind of like occasionally these visual memories where you just listen to a poem and suddenly you wake up after a short period of time. What was that image? That was fun. This one's called The Last Watcher. I hope the birds never forget what their renaissance meant to the old woman, nestled on the sloping porch beneath a beige afghan after the stroke. I spent a lot of time in South Arkansas where the houses were old and the porches were wearing out and sloping down. So it took me back. All right, thanks.
So the next two poems are from my liver transplant era. The first one is Chimera, and a chimera in Greek mythology is a combination of a lion, a goat, and a snake creature. So in the world of medicine, a chimera is a person that has two different genotypes. So a person that has their own genotype in the transplanted person's genes is referred to as a chimera. Chimera. I wonder some days if my donor was a dancer, she said, gazing past me toward the exam room door. I was removing her staples, delicately crimping each one to form an M, the shape of birds I drew in flocks as a child. The seam of her wound a simple chevron, a stranger's liver sewn beneath her ribs. The staples slipped out easily, though her skin was already growing around them, her body so eager to embrace, to take in, something as foreign as surgical steel. Was it really so impossible then, her sense of how a whole other person's life might feel? And patients did always tell me, it's interesting that they could feel different things since they had the new person's liver inside them. And some people disregard that as just coincidence, but I don't. The older I get, the more I think there's not as much of a division as we think there is between the material and the physical. So I've gone completely metaphysical now, but we'll get back to science. This is a patient that I'll never forget. The title of this poem is The Things We Ask. Of all the things she could have asked, for a sip of water, for another pain pill, for a reason why her transplant failed, the yellow woman lying in her bed asked only if I could pray for her. What could I say? The unsayable now passed between us, a newborn absence, a knowledge of her impending end, leaving us both untethered, beyond reason, astronauts forgotten, left behind by their ship. United in this outer space, we began to pray, cold words sparking into flames of despair, of hope, the way a meteor descending ignites into the atmosphere, unearthly light widening the sky for miles. Thank you.
Are we doing all right? Okay, good. I'm going to read one long poem. It's a little bit complicated. It talks about, I think someone here has talked about how we translate a lot in medicine. You're seeing one thing, and I see an EKG, and I translate it into, you can think about who and where and what and take it up. So this is called Charting in the Clinic. And it features, there are three patients. The first one is a healthy, worried, well, late 20s, early 30s guy, perfectly fine. The second one is an upper middle class retired woman who lives, maybe in a condo on the edge of a golf course or goes back and forth to Florida with her husband. And the third one is an old, and these are indeed people who I saw in my clinic. And you think about, your translations and how good, where are you? So this is Charting in the Clinic. I spend all day translating bodies into words and back again, stenciling pictures as abstract as the moon onto your chest into some form you might understand, channeling you in Braille, in one of 800 languages lost in California, in the incantations of Sirology, a Kabbalah of numbers, a web of dancing dots supposed to be your heart. All of these things I turn into something else, struggling to twist into a ladder, an alchemist recipe, a rope for rescue, weave into comfort, or at least a plan, to cope for a while with whatever might be lingering outside, waving its own semaphores, which I must admit I missed entirely. So we both are on our own. And here's my worried well. You speak my language, you say, delighted with the good news, your exceptional self. When I talk about bodily hyperawareness, a bit of anxiety, which dates to your bike wreck or to your pneumonia 4 years ago. I'm a seer, a shaman, to intuit that you're a little on the obsessive side. And reassured, smiling, no more appointments necessary, you head out to the gym, satisfied. These fictions, yours and mine, useful, and close enough to some truth to work for both of us. I can enjoy my prophetic status for a moment until I meet the patient and her family in room 12. I spend all day, clinic time, sitting in a small concrete room, a sequence of such rooms, a plastic chair for you, whichever you is here, for this fragment of appointed time, a plastic chair on wheels for me, a tin desk, a computer wedged in the corner, a keyboard. And here we sit, you against the wall, my data source, my historian. I am here to edit the story of your life, annotate the text mixed of truth and myth, transliterated into your chart, your data dump, you as seen from our point of view, refracted, redacted, then sliced by our microtomes of statistics and time. And here's the lady, the woman. What are you telling me? Your gold chains and perfect hair, your pedicure and good shoes. You go to Florida for the winter to play golf. Yes, you have some friends there, but your cough is always worse in your condo beside the clubhouse. We're turning your story as best we can into something that comes out with a moral, a diagnosis, a plan, a place to go, an explanation, a statement about the future. You want a crystal ball. Your cologne is exclusive. You move inside it. Where is your husband this morning? In that chair across the room, looking like he wishes he were holding your hand? Are you rescued or walled in? I spend all day imagining how a bat would navigate this hallway. I'm missing the gear, the ears, the sonar, but still committed to the flight. A dog's view would be quite different, redolent with a deep history of where you've been, the character of your own dog, someone else's pajamas, and might tell us more than your own DNA, sleeping in its tiny tubes, reeling off its encyclopedia of letters when aroused in a chant with its own interpretations. And here's the Cambodian grandfather. Sometimes your only language is Cambodian, and your grandson has no idea what the tattooed lines circling your thigh in a blue sleeve really mean. He shrugs, says it is an incantation, a lost script, an old language, protection. He says no one can read it, even you. I suppose you have been off to war more than once, but we cannot talk about this. Your grandson doesn't know or doesn't care. or cannot know. But at night you do not sleep, wake up gasping, want a pill, ask for something. Believe in magic. I cannot imagine what you imagine as you watch me, as you turn towards me in your plastic chair. I'm putting everything I can into your record here, charting your voice, your heartbeat, your puffy ankles, the evolving fiction, which, for our purposes, will be you. You have created yourself many times, rewritten your history, the meaning of those painful prayers, your truths ephemeral, volatile, but at least yours. Mine, well, we settle on a pill, shake hands, smile ineptly, acknowledging our temporary and mutual goodwill, which I know is not enough for nighttime with its knots of blood and dark spells. I spend all day translating bodies into words and back again, sitting in a small concrete room, imagining how a bat would navigate this hallway, interrogating your DNA, trying to sing along with your current self in a pentatonic scale only a dog can hear.
I remember when Brenda retired. I've always held her in the highest esteem, and when she retired, I had to invent a new adjective. I was trying to think about what you could do in one word, and I came up with kindtankerous. To reflect her love of her patients and her energy. So and I think that's continued. I wrote this poem. I spend a lot of time. I'm chief of medicine over at the VA, so I see a lot of patients who are veterans, and they have children who are in active duty that they worry about. And so I wrote a little poem a bit about the nature of worry and about the problems with time. And this one's called Lapse PTSD. The lag time is the shadow. For is anything more futile than earnest prayer to preserve a son, distant, hours in the future, squatting low in a shallow hole, the wound no longer oozing red on his forehead? But all this happened some time ago. Before we woke and father made coffee, before the shower with oatmeal soap, before the drive, before the pew, well before clarification of the air with a bell, and the call to silent supplication. I raised a teenage daughter. I get to go see her tomorrow and see my grandson, which is going to be wonderful. But I do remember when she would be out on a date, and I thought, there's probably already been a terrible accident. And that's why she's 30 seconds late. Makes perfect sense. But if it had occurred, does it help me? It's already occurred. There's nothing I can do about it. So I was struggling a little bit with the nature of time and the nature of worry. So when you all come up with the answer, please give me a call. I'll be waiting by the phone. I have another poem. This one's a bit more medical. There's a surgical thing you hear on rounds sometimes where if there's a problem with the wound and they can't quite sew it up because it's been contaminated or after an accident, they have to let it heal on its own. And they call that healing by secondary intention. Now, when you're a poet and people walk around saying things like secondary intention, what are you going to do with that? You got to do something. So I wrote a poem called Secondary Intention. First wounds, inflicted sharply and quickly, without warning or malice, can be repaired. With care, they heal, with good cosmetic result. But when your love leaves without a word, taking everything, it dawns that the tunnel was dug by the spoonful for months, and every nuance must be considered. If tissue is lost, and the gap too great to bridge, or if the wound has been neglected and allowed to fester, It cannot be closed primarily. Patching the surface would only allow infection to progress beneath the skin. There are ancient ways of healing, not skin deep, but bottom up. The pebbled, scarlet, proud flesh takes its own time and crafts a new portion of being, smoothing the surface with scar. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank y'all for being such a great audience tonight. It's been such a delight to be here with you. The last two poems I'll read are some of my newer poems, and I'll just read them. You can just listen to them. Found Coin. The coin has sorrow's face furrowed on one side, kindness on the other. I carry it with me now wherever I go. Small and thinner than a dime, I feel its crescent moon curve wedged in the crease of my right hip as it rides in my jeans front pocket. Little hitchhiker, I picked it up driving through Louisville, headed back from Indiana, that flat land like a page of prose punctuated with exclamations of grain silos. It rode with me all the way. When we stopped for gas, the Amish man held the door for us as we passed into the cool air, smells of packs of peanuts, beef jerky, the sweet tang of the Slurpee machine. And the Amish girls nodded, white-capped, heads bowed even as they walked through rows of pork rinds to the restroom, no setting ever immune to reverence. And the coin swayed in my pocket, sorrow and kindness humming in time with the thrum of the cooler in the back. And then as summer goes, the older I get, the more I think about my childhood. And I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, where I learned, among other things, that wet tobacco, if you make a poultice, will take the sting out of a bee sting. Everybody, people know that you've, okay, y'all are my people, okay. So the poem is Birmingham, summer 1979. Mimosa, white oak, hickory, sweet gum, and every kind of green under the sun, the heat so thick we wore it without shoes, better to feel the cool of St. Augustine grass on our calloused soles. Evenings, the dark loitered, day lasted until the fireflies blinked on and the backyard became a galaxy. Then came the mulish thrum of a box fan in the nighttime hallway, the gathering of leathery neighbors at a listing but still blue pool, hidden in a hollow below I-65, and Mr. Whitehead with his Winstons, always ready to soothe the bee sting with wet tobacco, a gesture as practical and kind as teaching a child which type of leaves grace poison ivy, or which things to take with you and what to leave behind. Thank you.
Well, friends, it's been a good night. And I don't know, we might have a minute or two remaining. If anyone had any questions for our poets, this is your opportunity. I know we've got folks in the house. I've been kind of floating around to see if anybody made any comments and such on the feeds. And we had to update because the transformer blew or whatever that was. But going once, going twice. We've got one here.
So as someone who's really, really an amateur, I mean, I don't know what you call it in the world where you're not, you don't often get paid. I'm curious to know about editing. I'd love to hear you say something about how you decide when you're done.
We'll all three give a shot at that, okay? Yeah, you pick things apart and put them together in other ways, and once in a while, months later, you'll look at it and move something somewhere and delete something, and it's better, and you don't know exactly what better means or why. So I don't exactly know. It's a mystery. In that clinic poem, I told you about the mysteries of translation. I don't know.
Yeah, afraid I'll strain my neck if I try and turn around too much. I can't say I have an easy answer either. I have some poems that I was working with the narrative medicine group, and I showed them some drafts. I said, here's the final poem, and I wanted you to see what it looks like. And it's just crossed out, and every word and every comma's changed. And then I had some poems that I just wrote down, and they were almost finished. But there's a lot of poems that I've written, and Brenda told me about this once, that for one thing, a poem has to want to be a poem. Sometimes it kind of starts, but it doesn't really want to be one, and it needs to go away. And sometimes a poem is actually not one poem, it's 2 poems or 3 poems. And so sometimes I'll scroll on, it's just not going anywhere, and you come back 6 months later and you look at it and you say, oh, well, of course. And I don't know what's happened in the interim, that you think differently and more clearly. So the thing about letting things incubate for a while really seems to work for me, but I don't know, I'll be interested to see what everybody has to say.
Can I just add, I want to add one other thing. This is why we need art in the schools. Because you don't know, no one can make those decisions or has those intuitions other than the artist. And we need to encourage that kind of self, I don't know, it's a combination of criticism and pride and power. And you can't do it by getting 100 on a math test, okay?
We got another question, but
I would agree that there's no set formula, but I found that doing some things like reading it aloud helps, especially if you're looking at the sounds of the poem or how to break lines or what words go together. Reading it aloud will help you find sticking points. So I encourage everybody, if they're writing poems, just they'll give you the sound of how your words sound when you read. I mean, it's meant to be read aloud. So think about that when you're writing, because that makes all the difference, I think. And then there's the subconscious mind is really your friend, and you can't force that. So like, go put it down and go cook dinner. And a lot of times it'll come to me when I'm cooking or walking the dog or gardening, doing stuff manually that you like to do. That's important. You gotta like what you're doing, and then give your mind a break, and it'll just click right into place most of the time. Most of the time.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to be kind to our cameraman and come back to the middle for a moment. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming. I'm going to put this away. This is getting real awkward for me. Thank you for coming. And as we close it out, note that we did have a little bit of a hiccup, and I'm sure others joined a new link to get connected. And so, as we close it out, let me close with a little bit of where I started. Reminder that we are here at Scarrett Bennett Center for Poets Corner. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for jumping on or rejoining on the Internet of Things. And if you'd like to be a part of what we do here in creating space where individuals and groups engage each other to achieve a more just world, I invite you to come back to the next Poets Corner. I invite you to come back to the next creative experience of an event. Come explore the art gallery on the 2nd floor in our Welcome Center. And otherwise, choose to jump in and connect. We've got our website, scarrettbennett.org, and there are always events being added. So scarrettbennett.org/events. Simple, right? Pretty easy. And you can click some links and find it. But you can see a lot of things that are happening here, from performances and concerts to creative opportunities to engage and write and collaborate. And I'm going to put some weird, quirky things up as I get this art studio going on campus. Come, paint, have fun with us. This is a good place to be creative and to engage in meaningful conversation around all things arts and spirituality, racial justice, and any number of other things, as we are all about things like women's empowerment and transformative education as well. So if you like any of that, thank you so much for connecting. I look forward to seeing you again. Go in peace. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. Until we meet again.